All right, as we start with January, I do want to touch base on what happened yesterday. And you've had a day to kind of take it all in. But you have to think about how neat it is that the Bakers, not only Mrs. Baker, but her brother-in-law, Mercutio Baker, you have to love how he noted like the letdown that Holling had when Mickey Mantle treated him like garbage. And then not only does he make up for it by giving them baseballs and giving them gloves, but Mrs. Baker agrees to it and allows them the time to go down to the gym and into the ball field to play baseball with two New York Yankees, two actual New York Yankees. And you got to see them yesterday. Those were actual New York Yankee players. Joe Pepitone eventually became the announcer for the Yankees for years and years, and is one of the most famous New York Yankees of all time because of that. So he's been around the team. He was around the team for a long time. So as we head into January, you can see that this relationship between Mrs. Baker and Holling is pretty tight. As much as he thought that this Wednesday war was going to be between him and her, it turns out that that's not the case at all. The book is, however, called The Wednesday Wars. So as we go forward, obviously the Vietnam War is going on, and you can see conflict all over the place, and our focus this week is going to be conflict. We're going to take a look at some more conflict, but kind of their relationship as we head into 1968 and we get to that halfway point of the school year and we start heading towards the end of the school year. Also, we have a baseball game to look forward to in April, but that's for another day. All right, let's get started with January. Here we go. On New Year's Day, the Hometown Chronicle devoted itself proudly to celebrating the many accomplishments of those young and old who had made outstanding contributions to the life and culture of our town in the past year. It wasn't a very big issue. Most of the stories were about librarians and the Kiwanis Club officers and the veteran of foreign wars and Mr. Guareschi for something, and even about my father for the enormous success of Hood and Associates and how he had been voted the Chamber of Commerce Businessman of 1967. The paper printed grainy headshots of people looking distinguished, like they were already thinking about their next outstanding contribution to the life and culture of the town. There was one action shot, though, of Ariel the Fairy flying high in the air across the stage of the Festival Theater. His legs splayed out as though he really was flying. The picture covered almost half of the front page. And the story told the whole world that the tights were yellow and that they had white feathers on the butt. No one is going to see it, said my mother. It's New Year's Day. Who looks at the newspaper on New Year's Day? It turned out that Doug Switek's brother did. Probably he looked at the picture on the front page. He saw who it was and what he was doing. And there was a flash of inspiration and ambition. Two great vocabulary words. Which was, according to Shakespeare, what Macbeth was feeling a day or so before he murdered Duncan. Macbeth and Duncan, another tragedy, a lot more death. Great Shakespeare play. Maybe for a second, Doug Switek's brother thought that since I had told him about Pied Ninny, he shouldn't do anything about what his inspiration and ambition were telling him to do. But probably only for a second. In the end, he was Doug Switek's brother. And he couldn't help himself. It's like there's a Doug Switek's brother's gene or something that switches on too. Now, he said that once before about somebody. It's like there's a Doug Switek's brother gene that switches on too. Who did he say that about at the beginning of the story? If you know, post a comment down below. Some of what happened after that we found out from Doug Switek, who came back to Camillo Junior High with a black eye. Which is not how you're supposed to come back to school after the happy holidays. The shiner had been a whole lot bigger and blacker a couple days earlier, he said, but it was still pretty impressive. It's hard to believe that parts of you can turn green and purple at the same time, but they can. So that goes to show you the relationship between Doug Switek and Doug Switek's brother. You also have to wonder why he got that black eye. Now, you don't know what Doug Switek's brother's up to yet, but once we find out, I'm going to come back to that question. At first, he wouldn't tell anyone what had happened, not even when Danny threatened to give him a matching set of black, green, and purple eyes. But when I promised him one of my free cream puffs from Goldman's Best Bakery, he gave in. People will do just about anything for one of Mr. Goldman's cream puffs, I guess. So here's what happened. It was still early in the morning when his brother found the newspaper. Doug told us, since it was the day after people had stayed up to watch the New Year's ball drop in Times Square.
Moving from the 100-foot tower on the Allied Chemical Building, used to be the Times Tower. Now the Allied Chemical Tower, it's 100 feet, 50 rather, 40, 30, 20. The ball is slowly moving as the seconds tick off. About 25 seconds to go. When it hits the bottom, it'll be the new year. And from Presque Isle in Maine to Mel Sinfilia in California, there are wishes for happiness across this broad land in the new year ahead. Just a few seconds to go, and then 2,000 watts in 8 bulbs means 16,000 watts of happiness for the new year. 7 seconds, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year!
His brother figured everyone was sleeping late. He put his coat on, went out into the neighborhood, and stole the front page of the Hometown Chronicle from every stoop he could find. And there were plenty. And he came back home, carried them up to his lair, and cut out the Ariel the Fairy picture from each one, careful to include the headline, which was this: Hauling Hood Hood as Ariel the Fairy soars on stage to rescue his potent master. This isn't at all what was happening in the play, but that was the least thing to fuss about. After he finished cutting out the pictures, he took them all to the basement and found the bright yellow oil paint left over from a go-kart he had made to run kids down with. Then he went to get Doug, probably because he didn't know how to paint inside the lines. Prediction. And this isn't a prediction for our crops this week, but a prediction. What is going to happen, and how did Doug Switek get his shiner? Right now, you should be thinking about that. And now let's read. See if your prediction was right. Doug wouldn't tell us what he said when he saw the pictures in the can of yellow paint. All I know is that he wouldn't help, and so took a black eye. His brother probably promised a whole lot more if he said anything about the pictures or the black eye. Then he found a brush and got to work himself. Whatever it means to be a friend, taking a black eye for someone has to be it. Now, we talk about levels all the time. What level is that? The rest of what happened I figured out myself. On the morning that school started again, Doug Switek's brother got to Camillo Junior High early. This should have warned somebody. If Mr. Goreshi had been in the halls trying to track down Sycorax or Caliban, he might have intercepted him, but he was probably supervising the unloading of multiple boxes of the New York State Standardized Achievement Test, which I hadn't been preparing for because Mrs. Baker refused to give us practice exams to do during the holiday break. So Mr. Goreshi never saw him, and Doug Switek's brother was free to change his inspiration and ambition into reality. He went up and down the halls, taping up pictures of Hauling Hood Hood as Ariel the Fairy, soaring on stage, all in bright, vivid, living, impossible to take your eyes away from color, even though a lot of it wasn't in the lines. He stuffed some in the 8th grade lockers. He taped some to the asbestos tiles on the classroom ceilings. He put them all in the stalls of the boys' restroom and in all the stalls in the girls' restroom, too. I heard that from Merrill Lee. He put them all over the drinking fountains and on every classroom door and on the fire escape doors and on the walls of the stairwells. He put them on the arches over the doors of the main lobby. No one figured out how he got that high without a ladder. And on the backboards of the basketball hoops in the gym. He even got them on all the trophies in the locked cases by the main administrative office and found a way to tape them to the administrative office counter so that they were the first thing you saw when you walked in. By the time he was done, every place you looked was bright yellow. It was high noon in the halls. The only thing that could have been worse was if the pictures had shown the white feathers on my butt. If they had, I would have had to leave the country. Hyperbole. As it was, when I walked into school, I figured this would be my last day at Camillo Junior High. Maybe I'd try the Alabama Military Institute. The Alabama Military Institute, it wasn't really called that. I think it was called the Military High School and College. It was a big deal during the war, the Vietnam War. And if I can find anything, you'll see it somewhere behind me, or you'll just see a quick video, but I'm not sure if I can find anything about it. Can you imagine what it's like to walk down the halls of your junior high and just about every single person you meet looks at you and starts to grin, and it's not because they're glad to see you? Remember this. Can you imagine what it's like to walk into the boys' restroom before the 8th graders have cleared out? Can you imagine what it's like to go to gym and have Coach Quattrini, the Pied Ninny, announce that morning exercises will be stretches so that we can all practice soaring like Ariel the fairy? No. You cannot imagine this, but let me tell you, it was a long first Wednesday back. Again, remember that paragraph. Put a star next to it. And to top it off, Mrs. Baker gave me a 150-question test on the tragedy of Macbeth. Let's keep you on your toes, she said cheerfully. Sometimes I still think she hates my guts. It's just the sign of a great teacher. Shh. By the next morning, Mr. Vendelari had torn down almost all the pictures. He hadn't gotten to the ones in the trophy case yet, or the ones in the main lobby. Merrill Lee took care of the ones in the girls' restroom. Good old Merrill Lee. But Doug Switek's brother had an ample supply. They showed up in the halls again that Friday, on Monday in the cafeteria, on Tuesday across the stage, front in the auditorium. Mr. Vendelari could hardly keep up. And when Tuesday was over, and I walked home figuring that I would be free of the picture for at least the evening, my sister was waiting for me at the front door of the perfect house. And she was holding one in her hand, complete with yellow oil paint. This, she said, was taped to my locker. So it had migrated, great word, to the high school too. Do you want to tell me why this was taped to my locker? She said. Because someone wanted to be a jerk, I said. Someone? She looked at the picture, then held it out to me again. Who looks like a jerk in this picture? Halling? I didn't take it, I said. You're the one wearing the yellow tights. I told you this would happen. I didn't care as long as it was just you. But it's not just you now, is it? This was taped to my locker. And now I'm the only one who has a baby brother who wears yellow tights. I'm not your baby brother. No, you're right. You're my brother who is all grown up and wearing yellow tights. She shoved the picture into my chest. Fix this or you die, she said. I never thought being in 7th grade would mean so many death threats. I considered my options. Cream puffs were not going to work again. The Alabama Military Institute was looking pretty good. Maybe Dad would even like the idea. That hope lasted until supper time when my father announced that the town had decided to build a new junior high school and that Hood and Associates had been invited to bid to become the architect. He looked at my sister after making the announcement. You see what being named Chamber of Commerce Businessman of 1967 can do for you? Gee, she said, I thought it was getting the nifty magnetic sign for the side of your car. That was the big deal. She smiled. My father looked at me. Just swell, I said. That's right, he said, and having a kid in the school is a big plus in making a bid like this. It makes the board members think that we have a deep commitment already. And if Hood and Associates gets this contract, we'll really be going places. I've been thinking of military school, I said. Dad took a sip of his coffee. I'm not sure Kowalski will even bother to put in a bid, he said. I'm thinking of military school, I said again. In Alabama. You don't have to say ridiculous things twice, Halling. Once is more than enough. Why is military school ridiculous? Asked my sister. Today, the Mets decided to play Buddy Harrelson $18,000 a year to play baseball. Can you imagine that? $18,000 a year just to play baseball. This for a player who can't hit the ball out of the infield. Holling going to military school isn't quite as ridiculous as that. But I'll give him this. It's pretty close. Okay, so just to put $18,000 in perspective, back then that was a big deal. And Buddy Harrelson wasn't a super great baseball player. Maybe in the time he was decent. But he was certainly no Mickey Mantle. Okay? So, and you can see that Dad doesn't even like the Yankees, which is probably why the Mickey Mantle didn't stand out to him. He's a Mets fan. Now, 18,000, let's put that in perspective. Right now, Francisco Lindor, through arbitration, is set to make $18 million a year. Yeah, things have changed. And he's not, that wouldn't be close to be making the most in baseball. The most in baseball is pushing close to $40 million by a couple of different players, Mike Trout and a couple of other different players. So things have changed. But you can see that his dad really could care less what Holling's talking about. And I suppose parents can be like that sometimes, but Holling's dad is like that all the time. It's not any more ridiculous than going to our high school, said my sister. My father closed his eyes. He took another sip of coffee. I think he was fortifying himself. Girls can't wear their hair too short. Boys can't wear their hair too long, my sister said. We can't wear skirts that are too short, or slacks that are too long, or sweaters that are too tight, or jeans that are too, and I'm not making this up, too blue. We can't even wear a turtleneck because it's too something. No one knows what, but it's something. Now that's ridiculous that a principal even cares about this stuff while bombs are dropping on people who hardly have any clothes is even more ridiculous. So she's clearly talking about the difference between the things that they're worried about and the things that are really happening in the world in Vietnam. Let's see what Dad says to this. I think we're probably all predicting what he might say. You don't wear those things because you're not a hippie, said my father. His eyes were still closed. What's all that got to do with education? Why can't a principal just make all those rules up? My father opened his eyes. Because he can, he said. And he put down his cup of coffee. $18,000. They're out of their minds. You can see just how much he's paying attention to his daughter and how much he pays attention to his son. This is a man whose world revolves around him. Talk about a level. The Alabama Military Institute faded right away. After supper, my sister came to my room. So you don't think you need to knock? I said. Holling, going to military school is a ridiculous idea. That's not what you said at supper. It's not a ridiculous idea because of why Dad thinks it's a ridiculous idea. It's a ridiculous idea because it's a military school. And because the next stop after military school is Saigon. So? She put her hands on her hips. Sometimes I wonder if you're even worth trying to save, she said. There's a war going on in Vietnam, Holling. Have you noticed? A war. 200 soldiers die every week. They come back home in black body bags stacked into planes, and after they're buried in the ground, their families get a new American flag with fancy folds, and that's it. She stopped. And I couldn't stand it if... She stopped again. It's a ridiculous idea, Holling, she said, and left. Pete Seeger began to play loudly in her room.
To everything, turn, turn, turn. There is a season, turn, 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 and a time for every purpose under heaven.
What was she going to say? And I couldn't stand it if... ... The next afternoon, after everyone had left for Temple Bethel or St. Adalbert's, and after Doug Switek and Danny had waited around until the last minute in case Mrs. Baker had arranged for Whitey Ford to show up, Mrs. Baker handed me back my Macbeth test. Macbeth and Malcolm are not the same person, though their names share an initial consonant, she said. I know, I said. Nor are Duncan and Donalbain, who also share an initial, and for that matter, concluding consonant, the same person. I guess not, I said. Malcolm and Donalbain are the king's sons, not... I said, it's not so easy to read Shakespeare, especially when he can't come up with names that you can tell apart. Mrs. Baker rolled her eyes. This time I was sure. Shakespeare did not write for your ease of reading, she said. No kidding, I thought. He wrote to express something about what it means to be a human being in words more beautiful than had ever yet been written. So in Macbeth, when he wasn't trying to find names that sound alike, what did he want to express in words more beautiful than had ever yet been written? Mrs. Baker looked at me for a long moment. Then she went back and sat down at her desk. That we are made for more than power, she said softly. That we are made for more than our desires. That pride, combined with stubbornness, can be a disaster. And that compared with love, malice is a small and petty thing. We were both quiet. Malice is not always small and petty, I said. Have you seen what Doug Switek's brother put up in the halls? I have, said Mrs. Baker. A wonderful picture of you playing a wonderful part. In yellow tights, I said. Well, she said, you may chance have some odd quirks and remnants of wit broken on you. That doesn't sound like it's from Macbeth. It's not, but I promise you, people will soon forget about Ariel. Dun, dun, dun. I sighed. It's a whole lot easier saying that than seeing... I sighed. It's a whole lot easier saying that than seeing yourself in that picture. I suppose that would be true, she said. It's not like it's your picture in the halls, or that you have all that much to worry about, I said. I know. Dumb. Think about why. Mrs. Baker's face went suddenly white. She opened her lower desk drawer, put her copy of Shakespeare into it, and closed it, loudly. Go sit down and fix the errors on your Macbeth exam, she said. I did. We said nothing else to each other that whole afternoon, not even when I left. I walked home under gray clouds whose undersides had been shredded. They hung in tatters, and a cold mist leaked out of them. What kind of clouds would those be? There's a bonus for you. The cold got colder, and the mist got mistier all through the afternoon, so that by supper time a drizzle was making everything wet and everyone miserable, especially my sister, who believed that she had hair that belonged in Southern California, where it would be springy and bouncy all the time instead of in gray, cold, misty Long Island, where it just hung. That's foreshadowing. So dumb. So we'll get to the dumb thing he said in a second, but I love how Mrs. Baker talks to him about like how malice, which means bad things, bad thoughts, is small and petty compared to love. That Shakespeare is about human life being beautiful. And it's an interesting comparison considering all of the war that's going on behind them. The obvious conflict in this chapter starts with two people, Doug Switek's brother and Halling. Okay, and I'm going to teach a short lesson on conflict this week that you'll be able to see on the YouTube channel. Anyways, let's get to a conflict that Halling creates. He's talking about his problems. And let's be honest, up till this point, he's really not been selfish about one thing, the thing with Mrs. Biggio. But through the rest of this story, he's constantly worried about how he's getting handled by Mrs. Baker, by his friends. And he has these moments of being a bigger person at the play and things like that. But here he's talking about himself with the pictures that Doug Switek's brother are posting. And that's horrible. I mean, imagine if you were that person. And then he says to Mrs. Baker, it's not like it's your picture in the halls or that you have all that much to worry about. I said, I know, dumb. And then he ends this section today with, so dumb. What does Mrs. Baker have to worry about? Something to think about. And why what he said was dumb. Okay, on to the next.